The Diamond, a place where legends are born, where hitters drop 400-foot bombs, where pitchers throw heat. The home of peaches, yard goats, trash pandas, and sod poodles. This is Ballpark Nation, your home for baseball from sea to shining sea. Now your host, the guy who could never crack his high school starting lineup, Jim Christopher.
And welcome back to Ballpark Nation, everybody. I will be your captain on this episode as we follow two teams who cannot be constrained by the earthly bonds of gravity. I was thinking about 70s pop culture the other day, as one does, and I was thinking about Elton John. Elton John is by far one of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters, and he has two songs, one that I think is perfect, and one that is almost perfect. And the reason why I feel like Rocket Man's almost perfect is it became clear to me as I was listening that he had never spent any time with the Houston Astros or the Sugar Land Space Cowboys, because if he had, he would know that there's no way you can be lonely out in space. I remember being a student at the University of Texas, and I had a professor that said something at the beginning of a semester that really stuck with me. He said, you have to remember that when you're studying something like history, that the person that's teaching the class, their point of view matters. Because in some ways, while the what happened is pretty concrete, the why can be open to interpretation. And so he would talk about being a Yankee liberal from Wisconsin. So how he viewed history would be different than those of us who grew up in Texas. I felt like it was important to provide similar caveats as we discussed the Houston Astros, because I am by far not your balanced tour guide as we look at this Major League Baseball team. They are my first love since I'm 10 years old, and probably my first heartache since also 10 years old. It's weird, I actually don't know if they were my first love or was it Star Wars, but I'm pretty sure it was the Astros. Either way, it wasn't about being on Earth. Anyway, that's a whole other thing for my therapist to work out. I have loved this team through thick and thin for going on 40 years now. I'm a season ticket holder starting in 2024. We will be again in 2025. So it's hard for me to look at anything that deals with the Astros or Minute Maid Park without some degree of emotional involvement. I felt like I had to deal with the bias right away because I didn't want people to think, oh, he's saying something good about the Astros and the Astros experience purely because he loves it. Or he's saying something bad because he doesn't want people to think he's saying something purely because he loves it. I definitely realize I'm walking a middle road on this, so I wanted to deal with the historical impact of not just Minute Maid Park, but the Houston Astros interwoven with my experience liking the team. But I want to focus on the history first because I think there's a perception that since the Astros have never really been under the national media spotlight until starting about 10 years ago, that there was no history before that 10 years. Now, people growing up in Houston know that it's a long and rich history of some really good baseball, but the nature of media at the time and the nature of the economic interest in the sport, you might not know that if you're living in Milwaukee. And guess what, Milwaukee? I don't know a lot about yours, which is part of the reason for the show. So the Astros were born in 1962 as the Houston Colt 45s. Prior to that, there was a long, rich history of minor league baseball in Houston, teams like the Houston Buffs, players like Dizzy Dean. In fact, when the Colt 45s came to life in 62, the baseball history in Houston was almost 100 years old already. There's been a lot of baseball. The Houston Colt 45s played at Colt Stadium, an outdoor stadium in Houston, Texas, until 1965 when they moved into the eighth wonder of the world, the Houston Astrodome, the world's first indoor air-conditioned sports facility. That's the best way to describe it. A completely awesome achievement in engineering and construction. When they moved into the new stadium, they had to change their name from the Houston Colt 45s. Now, with 2024 eyes, we think, well, yeah, you can't have a gun on your jersey. You can't do that. And maybe in 2024, that's correct. In 1965, however, This had everything to do with not getting the rights from Colt Firearms and even less to do with our perceptions of gun safety or not. Sorry, but it really was something as simple as trademark violation. Now, in the early and mid 60s, there was a lot of energy in Houston around the space program. And in fact, when Alan Shepard first walked on the moon, the first word ever uttered was Houston. So because the space thing was so big in Houston, that became the inspiration for the new moniker for the baseball team, the Astros, short for astronauts. Now, just like at the Johnson Space Center, the Houston Astros were pushing limits of engineering and design, especially when it came to the Astros uniform history. It's always been dynamic and a little bit crazy and a little bit ahead of everybody else. So first they had the really cool zip-up jerseys, but they really made a name for themselves with the jerseys that we call the Tequila Sunrise, which have the gradients of orange and red on the torso to symbolize the look of the rocket taking off and the blast. What would you call that? The red stuff. The backblast area is what we would call it in the Army, and I know that's wrong. So the jerseys were iconic. They were made out of a different material, and they were one of those teams at the time, like the Oakland A's, that really changed what a baseball team could look like on the field. And it was in these rainbow jerseys that a young scrapper named me first became a fan. I was an Astros buddy at a young age, and my grandfather went all the time, and I was the only grandson who would go with him. So I probably was going to 30 or 40 Astros games a year. My childhood memory could be off, it could be way more, it could be way less. There are two moments in Astros history that define men of a certain age. I'm that age. The 1980 loss to the Phillies, I don't remember that, I was 4 years old. But 1986 against the Mets, I'm 10. I remember everything that was painful and sad about that series. And that was my first brush with what would become a defining feature of the Astros for the next 20 years. And that would become regular season success followed by playoff failure. In the 80s, you started to see the uniforms change again. This time, you saw the rainbow on the torso move up to the shoulders. It was also during this era when you saw two bright shining stars, see what I did there? In the form of Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell making their way up to the big club. Biggio, drafted by the Stros, and Jeff Bagwell acquired from the Red Sox organization for one of the most one-sided trades in baseball history. Actually, the Astros have a lot of those one-sided trades in baseball history, and luckily they kind of went our way. In the 90s, we saw another drastic uniform change when the Astros went to a really futuristic navy blue and gold look with the open gold shooting star. I loved this uniform from the beginning. I'm glad that so many Astros fans have come around on it because to me, it really is iconic and it keeps in the theme of the Astros without using the color orange. I actually think the uniform would have been much more successful if it had been a metallic orange star and not a gold one, but we can't relitigate that stuff. You're also starting to see some really good Astros teams in the 90s, teams that are winning their division, going to the playoffs, but coming up short. My personal history with the team is a little different now because I'm in the Army at this point. And I'll never forget leaving Bosnia in 1998, I think. Time is weird. And I'm getting an Army Commendation Medal pinned on me. And usually what happens is the Sergeant Major is supposed to give you some words of encouragement or advice. Now this Sergeant Major was a different cat altogether. First of all, speaking of cat, he looked a lot like Gargamel from the Smurfs. He was an old guy. He had been like an infantryman in Vietnam. So this dude had been around the block about 900 times. He always carried this cigar that he would never ever smoke. He just sort of chewed on. So when you take it out of his mouth, it would be all just stringy and disgusting. He was also from the Bronx. And so when he's pinning this award on me, he's telling me all the reasons why the Yankees will always be better than the Astros and the Astros will never win anything. As I would grow in my Army career, I'd get a little bit more bold when talking to people who outrank me. I was a private first class at the time, and there was no way I was volunteering for some kind of weird guard duty or ditch digging. So I didn't point out that the Astros actually had about the fourth best record in the 90s in the regular season. because we already talked about the playoffs. In 2000, the Stros move into the shortly named Enron Field, and if you want to know why it changed, just Google it. It's a very fascinating and very sad story. It's also when I went to buy my very first beer at a ballpark, because now I'm over 21. I'd come back on leave. I think I was at the first weekend series. So I wasn't there when it opened, but I think I was there either the first or second weekend series. And that was the first time I experienced how much a beer at a ballpark can really cost. It's also the next time that the Astros changed their uniforms. And this was always a change that I never really felt connected to. It looked generic. They were using a regular baseball script. In fact, if you Google it for font downloading on Photoshop, it just says baseball font, I'm sure. And it was red and black because those were the popular color combinations at the time. See Chicago Bulls. And, you know, they had the pinstripes and stuff. And I know a lot of teams wear pinstripes as part of their history. It isn't just a Yankee thing, but it felt like they were trying to be the Yankees. The joke I always try to make is it's like when you're watching a sitcom that doesn't have a really good budget, so he just drinks a can of soda because they couldn't get like Coke to sponsor it. These uniforms were so generic, they might as well just said baseball team. And that was it. But the team got really, really good. 2005, the Houston Chronicle declares them dead, and then they make the World Series. I remember being so excited to be in the World Series that I don't even necessarily remember any of the games, and before I knew it, it was over. And then, the desert. Losing seasons, and the only good thing that happened really from 2006 until 2015 was the selling of the Astros to Jim Crane and going back to a uniform scheme that looked more comfortable and felt more Astros. I remember getting the new hat for the first time, and I think I wore it on set for an entire film. And if you've ever shot a film in Texas in the summer, that hat was pretty gross by the end of it. Then you fast forward, that classic look, the H and the star, goes on to win 2 World Series. Yes, there's a little scandal in there, 7 straight ALCSs, and still is one of the best teams in baseball right now, and one of the best runs in baseball history. Now, getting to Minute Maid Park and how that reflects that history, obviously, everything that's happened in Minute Maid Park is represented well throughout the ballpark, particularly the more recent stuff. What's very cool about Minute Maid Park, however, is that Reed Ryan put in a Hall of Fame in the outfield concourse. So now you can actually see artifacts and be reminded of some of the great Astros that came way before this current group, dating all the way back to Colt 45 days. We're talking players and broadcasters. Everybody that made the Astros what it was is represented in that Hall of Fame or other places in the ballpark. Now, the architecture of the ballpark, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. Walking up, it is impressive. The way they folded it into the old train station, the whole left field side that's all glass. I just don't love the color of the roof, and then it gets really dirty. But I'm not an engineer, but it seems like the way they did the roof where it folds onto itself so it takes up really no extra space. I mean, this thing's set right in the middle of downtown Houston. It's got to be one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen in regards to how to maximize what little space you might actually have. They did a really good job in the concourse of leaving it flexible enough to change the way we as fans watch games. We're not the fans that sit in your seat the whole time and just stare straight ahead. So they have little pop-up bars and tables where you can stand and hang out. They've got a lot of different variations of club seating and different places that you can get different vantage points for the game, all based on what you're economically comfortable with. We talk about scoreboards a lot on this show, in part because in many ways that is the center of your game day experience, which we'll get to in a second. I'll be honest, as much as Astros fans love El Gigante, and I've seen it get damaged by Yordan Alvarez, I was there. At the end of the day, the scoreboard is very middle of the road in size, and even less impressive is its usage. We've talked about how other ballparks are now putting up advanced stats, and they're using OPS, and they're putting up launch angle and exit velocity, plus like fun facts about the ball player. They even have the walk-up song listed. It's a pretty basic scoreboard layout, which to me is a little annoying because to me that just seems all software and not necessarily hardware that you could use to make those changes. So I really would like to see Houston use its scoreboard more effectively, just like some teams like the Mets and the White Sox and the Twins use it. Those are some of the teams that we've already covered on this show that I think did a great job of using their scoreboard. The game day experience is really, really cool, in part because the crowd's really into it. The team has been really good. The roof closed, it gets loud. It's clear we're becoming a more baseball-educated city for some of my more casual fans. Outside of doing the wave, they seem to know how to respond to the right parts of the game. And again, players have said that it is a loud, intimidating place to be. If I did have a couple of knocks on the game day experience, the between-inning entertainment is all pretty basic. I've always thought that Major League Baseball teams should take a page from their minor league affiliates as far as what you can do between innings. I think the only real on-field thing the Astros have is the stealing the base thing in the outfield. Good touch, they always let the kid win. We have the shooting stars and they're awesome, but Orbit's a pretty unavailable mascot. He pretty much is on the field or in the suites, in the boxes, that's it. Not really moving around the rest of the ballpark like some of the other Major League Baseball mascots do. And there's really not a whole lot for kids. And that might seem like something my grandfather would not care about or really be annoyed at me for caring about, but we have to remember a couple of things. First of all, baseball teams are competing in attendance with theme parks, movie theaters, or, staying home. And it's expensive to get in a Major League Baseball stadium. It's expensive to eat, even though the Astros do a great job of letting you bring in food and drinks. All you have to do is check their website to find out what you can bring. But really good parks have a lot of fun stuff that kids can do. Parents can get a bit of a break. In Philadelphia, they have the wiffle ball and the rock climbing. The Mets have the wiffle ball area. The Astros really need to rethink how they design the game day experience, particularly when it comes to families. There's a lot of great food with a wide variety. You have a lot of local beer, including a really big St. Arnold's brewery area. You have a lot of bars for your liquor needs. So for the kids above 21, there's definitely plenty to do. So for Minute Maid Park, I would give it a 4.3 out of 5, and it definitely belongs on Jim's must-visit list. And if you do go, I want you to look out for two things. One, most of our fans are super friendly. They want visiting fans to have a good time. So if you're looking for something cool to do, just ask them. And remember that it's Houston. So outside of the ballpark, there is anything to eat and drink that you can think of, and I highly recommend Bungalow. It is my favorite place to eat in downtown Houston. Now, the only thing better than baseball is more baseball. So all you got to do is drive 23 miles to get to the Astros AAA affiliate, Constellation Field, home of your Sugarland Space Cowboys. Now, the Space Cowboys have an interesting, winding road of a history that got them to be the AAA affiliate for the Stros. They began as the Sugarland Skeeters, an independent team in the Atlantic League. That's right, a team off the Gulf Coast was playing in the Atlantic League. What is this, college football? The Skeeters set up shop with an excellent logo and branding, and they built a beautiful ballpark, and compete they did in the Atlantic League, winning the league a couple of times. Perhaps one of my favorite parts of their history is 2020. When they realized that baseball wasn't going to be able to happen, they made it work for fans of the game by creating the Constellation Baseball League that featured the Skeeters, the Rally Sloths, and a team that referenced a really popular Netflix show that I don't want to mention the name for fear of a lawsuit. Now, later in 2020, when minor league baseball got reorganized and Major League Baseball took a more active role, they really wanted to make sure that all the minor league affiliates were more settled for longer periods of time and, when possible, in closer proximity. At that period in their history, the Houston AAA team had been in Round Rock, which is great, near Austin, and Fresno, California. So through all that decision making, it was decided that the Sugarland team would be acquired by the Astros and become the Sugarland Space Cowboys. Now, when it was announced that there would be a brand change, there were actually a lot of people that were really worried because the Skeeters had built up that big of a following. We had the new name leaked to us on the show a little bit early, and part of me was worried because 4 words, Sugarland Space Cowboys, I didn't know how it would roll off the tongue. When the branding was announced, chef's kiss. It was like the Big Lebowski's rug. It just tied everything together. It is a brand that is fun and really plays up the whole history of space in Texas, but obviously the cowboy thing. But it's also designed in a way that it plays very classy. It's also very cutting edge, which falls into the tradition of the Astros uniforms. For example, Just like the Astros, they have the jersey with the colors going up and down. But the Space Cowboys, they're using a gradient from one color to the other as opposed to defined lines. It just seems like one little step in a direction to add a little bit of oomph. I also really love the word mark, and I love how on all the lettering you can see the stars. Those little things made it stand out, and just like being tied to a rocket in Cape Canaveral, all of a sudden it's one of the best looking and best selling brands in minor league baseball. Now, we did get to talk to Garrett Green, he's the voice of the Space Cowboys, about how the fans reacted going from the Skeeters, the thing that was kind of their own little piece of baseball, to the Space Cowboys, which were bigger and part of this entire Houston baseball empire. And I was surprised at what he had to say.
You know, we have the advantage that we're just right down the road from Minute Maid Park. So while, you know, it can take you an hour to get from here at Constellation Field to Minute Maid Park, depending on what kind of day it is, it's not a giant leap. And also, now that we've had guys that have come through this area, you have Hunter Brown, who looks like an ace for the Astros. He was the Pacific Coast League Pitcher of the Year in 2022 here. Jeremy Pena played here in 2021. You know, he's obviously Gold Glove winner, ALCS, and World Series MVP. Impact guys like Joey Loperfido, he's up with the team this year. Spencer Arrighetti. You know, these guys have come through here, and I think that people are starting to understand that you don't have to say, like, oh, who's this guy that's coming up from, you know, Fresno or Iowa or wherever. It's like, no, they're right here in your backyard. And obviously, I think it was a combination of two things to try and get everybody to understand the shift, which was one, physically going from independent leagues to AAA, and the other then was the rebrand going from the Sugarland Skeeters to the Space Cowboys brand. In the first couple of years, I think it was a little difficult because people would still say Skeeters and things like that. But now that we've had a couple of seasons, I think that, and especially because we have just a fantastic marketing team, an entirely great front office that's here that does a great job with branding and messaging, I think that that's made that transition in just a couple of years' time to where people understand a little bit better what exactly it is that we do here now compared to the very good operation that was run here, you know, in years previous whenever they were in the independent leagues.
Now, there were a lot of people who had never been to Houston, had never been to Sugarland, had never seen a game at Constellation Field that were already grumbling. How is an independent park supposed to be a AAA park? Well, they'd never been to Constellation Field because they built this to the standards that you would expect out of the highest levels of minor league baseball. And so when they made the transition, it automatically became one of the coolest, most fan-friendly parks in all of AAA. They did a great job of transitioning the branding so it feels like the Space Cowboys have always been there. Every place in the park has really good sight lines. It does have that 360-degree walk around. And out in the outfield, you've got bars, picnic areas. You've even got a bar built into the outfield fence called the Bullpen Bar. So there is a lot going on at this ballpark that makes it one of the best places to go see a baseball game. And when you get to watch the baseball game, you get to look at one of the best surfaces in all of baseball. I don't know if you guys know this about Houston and Sugarland, but it's hot. And it's not even hot and dry because they actually get more rain than they do in Seattle. The difference is they get it all at once. So it's not easy to keep something green and lush. So my hat's off, or my proverbial hat is off, to the grounds crew who does such a great job of making sure that they keep that field looking pristine. Thinking of the recently passed James Earl Jones, it is the perfect place to sit in shirt sleeves down one of the baselines and cheer your future heroes, because these guys are going to go from AAA and eventually be part of the foundation to keep the Astros run going just 23 miles up the road to Minute Maid Park. And you cannot deny how awesome their kids area is. The Jungle Gym is super cool. It's built to look like there's a rocket ship. And they also have a world famous splash pad, which is the perfect place to send your kid, or you if it's that bad, to go survive some of the heat and the humidity that you're going to experience in Sugarland. But if you don't like the heat and humidity and you want to watch the game inside, you can do that too in a club level that's incredibly affordable, that gets you food and non-alcoholic drink and a seat outside and inside to be able to watch the game. When it comes to a logo and brand design that is this cool, all you really got to do is just throw it all on a Gildan t-shirt and go out about your day. except the people at Sugar Land don't do that. There is such a wide variety of shirts and jerseys and hats and kid stuff and adult stuff and accessories that you're bound to find something that fits your style and your look. Some of it is silly, like you would expect out of a minor league baseball team, and some of it's really classy and old school looking. I really love the gear with the mission patch on it because it really steers into the skid of being a Texas team, and if you've spent 5 minutes with me, you know I love that. Now, when it comes to game day experience, yes, they have the dollar dog nights and they have the really inexpensive beer nights, and they do a great job with theme nights and all that entails. Alternate jerseys that look really great and are really fun that you can either buy or buy at auction to help benefit a charity. They have the ones that you would expect. They of course have Star Wars Night and some of the others. When it comes to alternative jerseys though, I really like the ones that really reflect parts of their connection to NASA and space, like the really cool Galaxy one that they have. I also love that they reflected on some of the World War II history of the area, because a lot of people might not realize that the Gulf Coast of Texas and into West and Central Texas was essential to the development of the Army Air Corps. So they reflect some of that in some of their theme nights as well. But all of it looks great, and they do a great job of tying it together. And as we've seen from a few teams already, they do an excellent job with their Copa de la Diversión night, and we wanted to talk to Garrett about how that night goes because we were at one and we had a blast.
When we rolled out our Dulces brand, which is our Copa identity. And so like that's kind of a minor league initiative and everything, but and I got here late last season, so I wasn't part of all the planning for it, but the small details and the way that we engaged the Latin community and worked with people like the Hispanic population here in the area, and then the way that just the vibe of the ballpark, it felt like a party for 3 straight days, and we had dancers and mariachis and all and the ballpark's packed for those 3 nights as well. Our team did a fantastic job getting people out here, and that's just kind of the first one that jumps into my brain as one of my favorite theme nights that we've done.
So one thing about Texans, y'all, we love being Texans. We love our flag, and we love the shape of our state. So when you walk and you get your first view of Constellation Field's playing surface, you can't help but be drawn to the scoreboard, which is shaped like the state of Texas. It's awesome. So all in all, we're going to give Constellation Field, home of the Sugar Land Space Cowboys, a 4.5 out of 5, and it definitely belongs on Jim's must-visit list.
And now on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, Jim Christopher.
Now it is time for re-entry. We are having a smooth and safe landing as we return from hanging out with the Astros and the Space Cowboys. Again, this is Ballpark Nation. I'm your host, Jim Christopher, and we're going to see you very soon at the ballpark.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, 'cause it's root for the home team. They don't win, it's a shame, 'cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're right at the